right, let's talk about reporting and interviewing for our data project. Interviewing is key and central to this project being effective, right? So we have got some great data. You're going to be excited about what you've discovered from it. But without people, we do not have a compelling story. So seldom is the data the story, right? So this is what we're going to do. We've adjusted this a little bit in light of our circumstances, and we're all staying home. So, sourcing requirements for the story. A minimum of 3 sources quoted in the story. We're going to talk a lot more about that. Some here, some in the next couple slides. So a minimum of 3 sources. In-person interviews are still an option. They're not recommended. I think that makes sense that you don't do that, but you have free will, so you make your own decisions. Phone interviews, definitely preferable, right? So 3 sources quoted. The optimal would be for these to be 3 people that you interview. So you do phone interviews. In this instance, email interviews will also be accepted. Frankly, email isn't an interview. It's questions, somebody responds to them. It's not really that give and take with follow-up questions, but you can get some reasonable information from that. So email interviews also acceptable. You're not going to have photos. It's an option if you want to ask people for their photo. I think particularly if you're interested in doing something with your project, having your story published, having photos can really help add credibility. So ask the person to send you a photo that you have permission to use. In the story, you're going to include the source name, title, occupation, whatever that identifying information is, enough for the reader to feel confident that this person knows what they're talking about and this is who that person is, so we can understand how they fit into the story, how they fit into the community. So let's talk about alternatives to sources you interview. Again, because these are special times, we are going to accept alternatives to interviews, but it still really needs to be credible information. This is important, and it's an important skill to learn and to work on. So finding credible sources of information that fit with your story topic will be imperative regardless of whether you're going to interview people as well, because you're going to need this information. But in this case, we will let stand 3 sources that you quote from credible websites, such as government websites, news organizations, academic organizations, researchers, associations of whoever, right? So any place where you can find some credible information about your topic. So for instance, in a moment we'll talk, I'll show you a little bit more about this housing and urban development publication. A report that was done a few years ago has lots of good information in there. You may choose to quote from that. And so in that case, it would be like this example. More students face financial insecurity due to rising housing costs. This is according to the 2015 report from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And it would you would link to the report, right? That's what the link is. Or maybe the CDC is appropriate for what you're doing. And so you've got all these news releases from the CDC, lots of information on their website. You choose to use something from there, right? So you would quote and say the CDC said in a news release, or released by the CDC in a news release. Say that you want to use a media outlet. And so, you'd love to get a hold of Greg Abbott, the governor, but he's a little busy right now. So you're going to quote him as he was quoted in the Statesman. The economy in Texas is facing significant challenges. Governor Greg Abbott told the Austin American-Statesman in March, or even on the specific date. And then you're going to link to that specific story. Again, we don't like to quote other media outlets if we can avoid it, but sometimes we have to. This is one of those times. So these are the ways to do that. And we'll talk more about that in our mini lectures on writing and how to attribute, that sort of thing. I encourage you to still aim for some phone interviews. I think that we can all work on our interviewing skills. We can all get better about talking to people, getting the story, right? Really hearing people's stories. And think about this. This is a time when people want to tell their stories, right? So who can you talk to? Whose story can you hear? We have an obligation as journalists to tell people's stories, to take good care of their stories, and to get their point of view out there. So this would be a time to, interview students, business owners, people affected. So I realize that it may be more difficult to get that academic researcher on the phone, although you absolutely can still try. But do think about making some personal contacts, right, through phone interviews or video interviews as well, right, at least email. So give that a try. So let's think about the voices that should be in your story. We have a very diverse community, San Marcos, the university. So, and it's not just diverse with respect to race or ethnicity. It absolutely is, and that is absolutely important to your story. But it's also with respect to age, with respect to position, socioeconomic group, right? I mean, all of these various ways that we are a diverse community. And so for me, source diversity equates to accuracy. It can be so hard when you're trying to write a story that represents an important issue in a community. And you think, like, I've talked to 3 people, that's not enough, right? So you easily may need to talk to 10 people or 12 people so that you get a sense of it. But, especially when we're talking about, say, if you're talking to students, one student's opinion is a student's opinion, but having a number of voices behind that will really help you claim the credibility in that story. So multiple perspectives, very important. Let's talk about categories of sources. I like to put sources into 3 categories. These are not hard, fast categories, but they give you a general idea of how we look at who plays a role in a story. So authority or power. So somebody who has authority over the issue. So for instance, President Trouth has authority over the university, as do the people who report to her. And it's, sort of goes down the line until you get to people who have no power, like me, right? So, professors, they may have power over their classes, right? But the president and the administration, they make the rules and policies about the university. And then we talk about experts. So an expert is somebody who they don't have a dog in that fight, right? They're not the ones making the rules about the university, but they potentially know about rules at a university or say specific issues at a university. They know about diversity and inclusion at a university. And then we talk about people who are affected by this. So who are the rules being imposed upon? Let's think about it like this, right? Let's take a topic. So if the topic is a change in apartment zoning for a city, so San Marcos is going to allow an apartment complex to go up right here, which used to just have this small business. So now that's planning and zoning officials make those decisions. The mayor, city council, they make those decisions and vote on those decisions. They have the power over this issue. Then we have people who know about issues like this. They are not directly involved in this issue potentially, but they know about this. So the American Association, or American Planning Association. There is an association for everything, literally. There's an association of associations. The American Planning Association has a Texas chapter. There are tenants and owners associations who may not be directly involved in this, but overall know about how communities react to this sort of thing. There could be a professor who studies urban planning. In fact, there are professors, lots of them, who study urban planning. Some may do specific research on this issue. And then, equally as important, sometimes more important than these other people, would be the affected groups. Who is affected by this story? So think about renters, right? Students, families potentially. So, one apartment complex is here may displace other people who have an interest. Maybe business owners would be affected by this. Managers of complexes, but also maybe managers of small businesses in the area on multiple sides of this issue. Is there a neighborhood association that's affected by it? And let me say this about, think about this. Think about the issue of an apartment complex being built downtown. So the Chamber of Commerce, right? Business, groups of businesses may be represented by this association. Groups of residents, if we're talking about a neighborhood, a number of homeowners might be represented by this homeowners association or neighborhood association. That helps us get this one group to give us an opinion, presumably that represents a larger group of people. And that can be a very effective way to hear the voices of a community. Student groups may be the same thing, right? So the student group may not necessarily be about students who live in San Marcos, but there could be groups of students who can speak to this perspective, about how expensive it is or something like that, right? So groups can be a good way to access affected people. So up next, In the next short video, we're going to be talking about interviewing strategies. So strategies for interviewing coming up next.